Any darn fool can make something complex. It takes a genius to make something simple. Quote from Albert Einstein. Let me guess. You want to be rich. Or maybe you just hate your job and want financial freedom. Whatever the reason you turned into this episode, yes, I will share how to do this based on years of networking with the rich, countless books on how the rich behave, and my own wealth building journey. I started with that quote because, believe it or not, becoming rich is mind-blowingly simple. When I write these episodes, I always fear that if I deliver something too straightforward, people won't buy into my logic. I feel compelled to add complexity or risk lacking credibility. But thinking retrospectively on my wealth building journey, I can't bring myself to say I ever had a complex strategy or achieved some game-changing knowledge that the market didn't already have, or really anything mind-blowing for that matter. The mind-blowing portion really is the simplicity. So, if I've done this right by the end of this episode, you'll know what you've been doing wrong and what to do right going forward. And you'll see that the hard part isn't the concept, it's the execution.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
Intuitively, since most people aren't rich, you should expect that wealth building requires being not normal. And as you could probably guess, most people are doing it wrong. We will cover a lot of ground in this episode, but the gist is really this simple. Most people don't invest enough of their own money, and the ones that do don't invest in the right things. Why are people picking the wrong investments? A lot of that has to do with lack of effort. It's way easier to just throw money at a low-cost index fund than it is to spend countless hours researching businesses, networking, and grinding out investment leads. Moreover, the risk one must take on the right investment is also higher than most people could stomach. High risk, high reward, right? Obviously, this goes way deeper than just you're investing wrong, but keep that in mind throughout this episode. Chapter 1, Capital Multiplication versus Capital Preservation. Generally speaking, wealth management falls into two categories: capital multiplication and capital preservation. Let's run through two millionaire scenarios: the A student and the risk taker. The A student studies hard in high school, harder in college, and does well earning a master's degree and scores a great high-paying job. This is the dream I was told to chase growing up as a middle-class kid. Let's say this person makes $100,000 a year on average, inflation adjusted, for their entire career. Let's also say they save an aggressive $20,000 annually after taxes, which adds up to $200,000 per decade. Ignoring compounding interest and inflation, as well as other expensive life events preventing investment, let's say from 25 years old to 65 years old, continuing that trend, the A student would have $800,000 at retirement, which would likely put this individual at millionaire status if you include compounding interest, capital gains, etc. Take a second to let that sink in. It took the A student an entire career to reach millionaire status. This newly minted 65-year-old millionaire has the funds to retire comfortably, continuing their same, best case, upper middle class lifestyle. There is no private jet. There is no villa in South France. There is no Ferrari. Now, if the A student lived a balanced, fulfilling, well-rounded lifestyle, sporting lots of great relationships and meaningful work, then this sounds like a great deal. But the opposite sounds like a nightmare. The A student could have experienced utter misery at the wrong job in corporate America, chasing a dream their entire career only to hit financial freedom at retirement with some severe limitations. And don't forget, I've assumed this person saved an aggressive $20,000 per year, each year, for their entire career. So essentially 20% of gross income. When I worked in corporate America, I didn't save anywhere close to that. I was closer to 0% than 20%. Hitting 20% of gross earnings annually for savings and investment may be impossible for most, especially as housing and education costs continue to skyrocket. So who is the A student? The A student represents an upper middle class career and retirement trajectory. It's a comfortable life, one that hinges on getting rich slowly over time while dumping time into a corporate job. I feel compelled to reiterate that this is not a bad life. But you tuned in to learn how to get to that next level. So let's learn why the A student didn't become wealthy until, best case scenario, retirement age. Chapter 2. The A student's mistake. The A student was smart, hardworking, loyal, and followed orders. The best case scenario reward at the end of all of that was essentially just the same lifestyle they were accustomed to their whole lives, but without having to work anymore, or upper class with time freedom. For people with a well-rounded life, with lots of close relationships, meaningful work, and time and autonomy to do what they want when they want to, this is a really good deal. But for the rest of us, who struggle finding a balance in our lives, this sounds awful. My prior career path made me feel stuck, overwhelmed with debt, overworked and underpaid, with not enough time in the day to get anything done. Exchanging decades of that work lifestyle for that type of retirement sounds like a raw deal. So what went wrong? And more importantly, how can one change this? Simply put, the A student focused on capital preservation instead of capital multiplication. To quote a successful real estate entrepreneur friend of mine, you can't get rich making a 7% return. At least not quickly. Where does the A student invest that $20,000 annually? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, index funds, etc. And what does the stock market traditionally yield? A 7% return. 7% annually of $20,000 is only $1,400. Yes, over time, this adds up to a bigger number, especially as compounding interest works its magic. But fundamentally, this investor opted on preserving, not multiplying their capital. So, it's a mindset problem. When should one focus on capital preservation? For example, if you inherit $5 million, then a low-risk 7% on that sounds wonderful. Even a 5% dividend on that $5 million or $250,000 passive annual income sounds absolutely wonderful. But most people don't have $5 million. So, to be blunt, if you don't have a substantial amount of money in the bank and you want to get rich, you absolutely cannot focus heavily on capital preservation. Again, it's a mindset issue. Chapter 3. capital multiplication. While the A student took the conventional wisdom and slowly built wealth over decades via capital preservation, the risk taker, on the other hand, operated with a different mindset, one of finding ways to multiply capital. The risk taker took that $20K after taxes and multiplied it to 100, and then that 100 into 500, and so on. But one can't multiply 20K to 100K if one doesn't even have 20K. So if you aren't starting with much, like I did, this forces you to trade your skills, time, and willingness to do what others wouldn't do for sweat equity. So yes, even with no money, you can find ways into equity. Now, if you take nothing else from this episode, it should be this. The risk taker spends years developing skills, networking, and self-assessing so that when the right opportunity hits, it's go time. In short, the risk taker slowly, methodically, over time develops skills and works hard to identify opportunities to multiply their investment dollars, while the A student opted to preserve their stack, placing their money into lower risk opportunities. Again, it's an effort thing. The risk taker puts effort into becoming rich. The A student just prefers to invest slowly over time. So the answer is this simple. Shift your mindset away from the lower risk, lower reward capital preservation model to the higher risk, higher reward capital multiplication model. Easier said than done, right? What opportunities like that even exist? And how does one consistently find them? Apart from getting lucky in the stock market or finding a Bitcoin before anyone else does, capital multiplication almost exclusively occurs from investing in a small business. I know plenty of risk-taker millionaires. Some maintain high-income corporate jobs and properly preserve their capital long enough to angel invest. Others develop skills over years and then risk it all starting and scaling their own business. Regardless of which bucket they fall into, the one thing they all have in common is how they think. They all constantly ask questions, research, and look for opportunities to back, either just financially and or sweat equity that will multiply their stack. Yes, they do take on a tremendous amount of risk. But, like Warren Buffett says, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. So mitigate the risk by putting in the effort. Chapter 4. Finding capital multiplication opportunities. It's really that simple. And yes, really that difficult. It's risky, takes a lot of time, sacrifice, and know-how. But if you can shift your mindset towards this almost obsessive mindset, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see capital multiplication opportunities exist everywhere. You've got to remember that even though most people do not espouse this mindset, enough smart, hardworking people do constantly look for these strong opportunities. So even if you find these opportunities, you should expect fierce competition. And that's why it's not enough just to be on the lookout. Realistically, you need to be differentiated or have a keen eye, seeing things others don't. No matter which way you cut it, you'll need to have a competitive edge that will allow you to strike. So how do you shift your mindset? I meet investors and wannabe entrepreneurs seemingly every day. The aspiring but not yet successful ones all have one thing in common. Wealthy or flat broke, they don't know how to search for multiplication opportunities. I hear investors all the time say things like, "I'll look at any good deal," but backtrack tremendously when faced with the possibility of recourse debt. I meet wannabe entrepreneurs all the time that say, I wish I could be doing what you're doing, but then aren't willing to quit their jobs, lose their benefits, half their salaries, and move into a mobile home 4 hours away from friends and family to chase their dreams like I did. I'm not saying they're wrong. I was there too. I said the same things they said. The difference is that eventually I saw what the market really provided. The market just doesn't provide a lot of low risk, high reward, passive investments for those people already with money. And the market doesn't provide a lot of low risk, high reward businesses you can just start in your spare time and scale quickly to be able to go full time in short order. So again, it's a mindset issue. That investor should consider less attractive caveats like recourse debt or no upfront yield or whatever concession they're comfortable with, as the market just won't provide low risk, high reward. And that wannabe entrepreneur should realize starting a business will come with major sacrifice and will take years, if not decades, to scale. But to be fair, I have met some people that do consistently find those low-risk, high-reward opportunities. So it is possible. But those people find those opportunities because they consistently put in the time. Mostly because it's their full-time job anyways. Shocker. Nothing good comes quickly. The people that spend the time win the rewards. So, for the people that want to multiply their capital while maintaining a lucrative corporate job, they must spend tons and tons of their free time researching, networking, and discovering potential businesses to back. And then they have to be right, or possibly lose it all. And for those wannabe entrepreneurs, they must develop skills over years and invest heavily in sweat equity, making sacrifices, building relationships, and grinding consistently over years, along with having plenty of luck to finally achieve that desired multiplication. Even for the risk takers, there is just no getting rich quickly. Chapter 5, Other People's Money. So let's say you develop the mindset, build the skills, and identify an opportunity, but this opportunity requires lots of capital to get started. Ian and I experienced exactly this when starting in mobile home parks. We had effectively no money, no experience, and no network. I mentioned before, we approached 40 banks for our first deal and earned 40 rejections in the process for a deal that ended up being a home run for everyone involved. Other people's money solves this issue. Obviously, we had to use OPM to even get started in the first place, but what about those already with cash to invest? Why should they give up equity? Let's say you find a property with a $100,000 capital raise that yields an incredible 20% cash-on-cash return. That's $20,000 annually, which is great, but not enough that most would consider that to put them in financial freedom. Plus, now all your capital is tied up, preventing you from investing in more opportunities without selling or refinancing your property. Now, let's say you can find 4 identically performing properties, but opt to put in $25,000 in each and bring on someone else for each to put up the other $75,000. Now you could ask for a 50-50 split on equity, either from performance or acquisition compensation or whatever. In this way, you would have 50% ownership in now 4 properties. You will have multiplied your capital by 2x, possibly on day one, now being worth $200 instead of just $100. But it gets better. You also now have $40,000 coming in. Plus, you may have negotiated for asset management fees or other types of income along the way. Plus, if it is time to sell or refinance, you'll be able to sell for a higher number if you have 4 properties packaged together. Banks also will enjoy a higher loan amount if you opt to refi, so you'll get better terms. Again, it's a mindset issue. Most people, myself included, hate the idea of giving up equity. It's called loss aversion, and it's normal. But do the math. OPM allows you to multiply capital. You just need to get comfortable agreeing to do something that feels naturally uncomfortable. To play devil's advocate, OPM does complicate things like operations, refinances, and exits. But, as with anything, with elevated risk comes elevated reward. You might decide, hey, forget all that brain damage. I'll do all this myself without any stress of OPM. You might decide there's no other way to scale the business without OPM. Regardless, you absolutely must at least consider using OPM, and if you decide to use it, make sure you partner with the right people. Chapter 6, Making Millions in Real Estate. So, how does one capital multiply in real estate? There are 2 main ways. First, simply buy properties that will be worth more than what you bought them for. But really, not so simple, as that requires money and the foresight to buy right. Both of those take time and or luck that you may not have. Second, you must find ways to increase your ownership share. If you don't have much starting out, like we did, you'll be forced to use OPM and then offer your sweat equity to boost your ownership share. For us, these equity boosts came in the form of finder's fees, operational goals. For others, I've seen back-end equity promotes that trigger after returning all invested capital. I've also seen waterfall structures that promote based on hitting certain return thresholds. Obviously, there's more than one way to boost your equity, but ideally, you want both. Opportunities that can be worth more in time and ways to increase your equity share. Regardless if you have money or not when starting off, you just won't have the skill set to be able to identify true diamonds in the rough. So, you'll need to learn, network, and grow over time to improve your ability to do both, buy strong opportunities, and execute on the business plan. If this feels overly simple and obvious, it's because it is. Real estate, for the most part, isn't a complicated game. It's a time-consuming game. And most people quit before they develop the necessary skills. So how does one make millions in real estate? Play the long game. Teach yourself the skills to identify and or execute on the business plan. Select the right properties. Or network like crazy to partner with someone that complements what you don't have. I left out one other option. The A student could have invested over 50% of their earnings. Using the same example, $50K annually invested, or more, would put the A student at millionaire status within 2 decades. The real rocket fuel for Ian and I hasn't been finding capital multiplication opportunities. Those are more like the actual rocket. The fuel for that rocket has been us reinvesting more than 50% of what we earn into those capital multiplication opportunities. With some exceptions, you have to have money to make money. So you need both the rocket ship and the rocket fuel, aka the opportunity and the cash. Writing this episode reminded me of one of my favorite episodes of The Office, which featured the character Michael Scott getting called out on a promise he had made several years earlier. He told a class of students he would pay for all of their college tuitions, assuming they opted to go to college. This episode brilliantly navigates the awkwardness of Michael Scott having to let these kids down in that he didn't have the money to follow through with his promise to put everyone through college, or even just one of the children for that matter. Jokes aside, a relevant line came from that episode. When pressed as to why Michael would make such a promise several years prior, his response was, "I just assumed I'd be a millionaire by now." Too many people fall victim to that exact same mindset. You wouldn't just assume you'd be ripped like Arnold Schwarzenegger with bulging muscles if you never went to the gym. You wouldn't assume you would just become bilingual if you never started learning. You can't just assume one day you'll win the lottery, or that somehow you'll just figure it out, or that it'll just happen. No, you've got to put in the effort just like anything else. And that is why this episode is on my skills series. Because wealth building is a skill. Like they say, skill building comes down to 3 things: knowledge, practice, and time. Go gain the knowledge of wealth building. Put in the effort via practice. Then just don't quit. Entrepreneurs make mistakes, but with the overwhelming amount of free information out there, you don't have to be doomed to making those same mistakes. You just have to find a consolidated version of the most important information. What if I told you I'll gift you all of my DD mistakes I've made over the years for free? Just leave me a 5-star review, screenshot the review after it goes live, and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, join our Facebook group, Mobile Home Park Mastermind. You'll find hundreds of other mobile home park owners sharing ideas, contractors, and deals. It's free to join, and we would absolutely love having you join us.